Welcome to Visionaries Global Media, your number one source for podcasting entertainment. Visionaries Global Media, envisioning excellence on a global scale.
Nattering with E. Nattering with E. Nattering with E. What up, world? It's your boy E and your man Tori, and Joe's going to join us at some point for your weekly dose of Nattering CHEL, the hockey podcast where we banter about basically the whole league, but mostly about the Leafs. So far, no crying, which I think is pretty good considering it's 17 games in. I mean, that might be a record for me at least. Tori, have you cried yet during this hockey season?
Not yet for this year, no. That heartbreak usually comes for me in the playoffs.
Yeah, yeah. We're at that point. We're at that point now where we can expect them to be like, yeah, how are they going to disappoint us now? I was thinking before we got online that if we did the intro, if we did the intro as like Joe, Eric, Tori, we would be like Jet. Like what up, world? It's your boys Jet coming at you from the Nattering with You studio. But then I'm like, do we want to be Winnipeg Jets fans? I mean, might not be a bad idea since they're like 15-1.
I mean, personally, I've had Hellebuck on my fantasy team for the last 2 years. So I've kind of been watching them because of that. And believe it or not, I mean, let me make it clear. I didn't expect them to go 14 for 15. I thought they were going to be one of the better teams in the West this year. Didn't think they were going to be one or two, but right behind those top couple tiers, which for them are, they're kind of the Leafs of the West, where the best division, the hardest division to get out of is just happens to be the one they're in, where there's always three teams that should get out of that division and two of them don't. But that being said, yeah, I enjoy watching them when I can. The blackout usually stops me from watching them, but unless I have other means or happen to watch replays or listening to it through the NHL app or whatever, it's they're not bad. They're a really deep team. I don't mind watching them.
So on the NHL app, you can actually like listen to the game, but you just can't watch it, basically.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was watching, I think it was yesterday or Monday. As we record this on a Wednesday, this will go out on probably Friday. But earlier in the week, I'll just say earlier in the week, I was watching the highlights between them and I think it was Dallas, and there was like a big time fight, like Adam Lowry versus Jamie Benn, like a captain's fight.
hmm
I love seeing that sort of thing. But like the leader of your team is like, nope, I'm dropping the gloves now, boys. Like let me step in and handle it. So, uh, what do you think of stuff like that? Like, could you ever? I mean, I know Matthews fought Stamkos. Well, like Stamkos forced him to fight a couple of years ago in the playoffs, but like sometimes I feel like that's what's missing from Matthews' game. Like him just getting frustrated and like punching the crap out of like someone. But
Yeah. I mean, if I had to put my money down, it will come one day. I mean, if you're ever going to make that statement, he's going to have to make it probably this year in the playoffs or by the playoffs, where he just grabs somebody, pummels them. Like, remember back when the John Scott thing happened and Kessel like beat the crap out of that one guy?
Oh yeah,
had him
yeah,
all bloodied and whatever. And like that was the first time anyone was like, wait, what? He knows even what he's doing, and like he tuned that guy. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I think there was a bit extra where his adrenaline was off the charts of that, like in that event. And it didn't matter unless it was John Scott himself that if he grabbed somebody similar to his size, he was going to tee off on them. It would have been an unfair fight with that being
Mhm.
said. But yeah,
Or it reminds me too of another example of that is I remember years ago, like first like opening face off, Kadri and Thornton dropping gloves, and like Kadri ripped like part of his beard out or something like that.
yeah, I remember that.
Oh,
And
yeah,
Thornton was not too happy. Yeah.
no,
And I mean, sorry, I guess what I was getting at with the whole Matthews thing there is he just needs to do it once. He needs to grab somebody, beat him up to show, okay, just, he can fight, he can hold his own. Obviously, we're not saying he's going to fight a Rempe or something like that, but
Mhm.
it just takes one time just to make people realize how strong you are. And often these guys, they joke or the saying around hockey often is, dad strength, from
Yeah,
holding the kid and picking up the kid and holding the crib and carrying all these other things that both parents often do. But a lot of the time, these boys don't get their playing weight until they're men. I mean, you can look at a lot of guys, even Yzerman and Sakic and whatever back in the day. They had good seasons as young guys, and then eventually, when playoffs became the thing for them, I'm pretty sure all of those guys have at least one career fight at some point, and those games probably mattered for something. So yeah, I do think he needs to maybe do it once. I think part of it is just showing the fact he won't back down. And one of those things is a couple weeks ago there where he Marner got hit behind the net, which should have been a penalty, by the way.
yeah,
He didn't even have the puck anywhere near him. It's interference defined by the rule clearly. But yeah, when he came to Marner's defense, he kind of cross-checked that guy. It just shows like we're a team. Don't mess with us. Obviously, if you're bigger and stronger and you take liberties, it is what it is. But most of our guys are willing to stick up for each other at this point. So,
yeah, exactly. I remember like when they were first coming into the league or the last like number of years, whenever Matthews would get like pushed around, Martyr would be the one running to his defense. And I'm like, or Adomi. And I'm just like, these guys are like 4 or 5 inches smaller than Matthews. Why are they fighting for him? Like it made no sense to me. Or like I remember when we had Sandine last year, he would step in to fight guys on behalf of Matthews, and I'm just like, no, Matthews should fight his own battle. The dude's 6'5". Like, come on.
yeah, and I mean, there's always the risk of cutting a finger or breaking a knuckle or dislocating a wrist or something like that in an event like that. So, like, you really don't want him doing that. You really don't want most stars doing it, and that's kind of what makes these guys like Kachuk and whatever more valuable and more unicorn-ish when it comes to the playoffs in today's NHL.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it just takes one opportunity to just stand up for yourself and show guys like, look, I have a boundary, and like if you push me there, I'm gonna snap. And like some guys back in the day are known for being psychopaths that like, you know, you're gonna push me past that line, I'll break my stick over your head.
Yeah,
Somebody does it, they break us. Again, I'm not condoning that, but I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
saying to the point that,
It happens. Yeah.
there's a limit that everybody has, and it's just a matter. Like even look at Domi in the at the Montreal game with Savard in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
Savard gave him like 6 or 7 cross checks, and I heard that I think it was on the Steve Dangle podcast. They were talking about how Domi was targeted most of the game. I didn't necessarily notice that while I was actually at the game.
Mhm.
But I did notice that, guys were finishing their checks and Domi was getting some slashes and some, you know, elbows and stuff. And they seem to, if not target him, want to piss him off. So he already was in the corner, pissed off, had a few shots taken against him. And then Savard gives him, what, 4 or 5, 6 cross checks. He turns around to a bigger dude and is like, okay, let's go. Like, I've had enough of your crap. Like, let's go. And that's what makes these guys special that stand out from the old NHL. So,
Yeah. What ticked me off about that specific thing was the fact that like Savard is bigger than Domi, and Domi has a tendency when he fights to like he'll get his shots and then he'll start pulling the guy down on top of him, so you don't know if like who actually won that fight. Anyways,
Hmm.
the reason I bring that up is because um watching that game on TV, Savard was going after him and hitting him like cheaply. I think he even like flicked him in the groin a couple times with his stick. So finally, Toby's like, you know what, screw you, buddy. Let's drop the gloves. And Savard kept his gloves on until Josh Anderson jumped in and like they all
And the
dodged
refs jumped in.
and they
Yeah.
and then he dropped his glove. And it was like you're bigger than him. Like why are you being a baby about this? Just drop your gloves. I mean, you obviously have the height and the weight on the guy. Who knows? Maybe you win that fight against Doby. Or maybe like you take a punch, but you fully deserve it the way that you're playing, you know? So
And when your team is kind of being questioned for character and heart right now, and when you as a team don't really show a lot of pushback or that like, unity or like anything that a team needs to be successful, it's just kind of like even in the exact moment that that happened, I said, of course you do that. You deliver 5, 6 cross checks while the guy's back's turned to you. He faces you and asks you to square up and you run away. But as soon as the refs come in and your own teammates come in, it's like, oh, hold me back, bro. Hold me back, bro. I'm gonna destroy you. It's like you had your chance. Shut up. Like I don't know. In moments like that, it just makes me question um why he's still on Montreal. A guy like Savard, he's a playoff quote unquote warrior that has, I believe, a no trade, and he just rots away in Montreal. And instead of showing scouts and eyes that are watching on a Saturday night against the Leafs that you care and you're willing to drop them for your team and the unity and whatever, you just do that. I think it just kind of put an extra sour stamp on the whole Montreal experience right now. And I'm not even a Habs fan and watching the games, but if I was, I would relate and understand kind of how frustrating it is to watch a team like that. I mean, we've been there. We know what
yeah.
it's like. So I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah. I remember saying to you a couple of years back, like maybe the first or second time where they lost in the first round, they beat the Leafs. I was like, you know, we've watched some terrible teams in our friendship. Like we deserve these teams that are like have the potential to get over the hump. Now, like 8, 9 years in, I'm just like, God, if we have to rebuild in like 2 or 3 years, I don't know if I can I don't know if I can do it. Like I would just cry the whole time. Like the pod would just be us tearing up, basically. Uh,
Yeah.
so you mentioned earlier that guys like Iserman and Messier and so forth would get into fights. So that brings me to what I wanted to focus on today actually was the Hockey Hall of Fame induction uh from this past earlier this week. So all of these all the players, so it was Natalie Darwitz, David Poyle, Pavel Datsyuk, Shea Weber, Chrissy Wendell, Colin Campbell, and Jeremy Rodick. So uh Natalie Darwitz and Chrissy Wendell, I knew played for Team US. I wasn't quite sure of their accomplishments because um a little bit my fault, but also I would say the media's fault. Like women's hockey is finally getting the looks that it deserves. But back when they would play in the 90s and early 2000s, like you literally had to really track that down if you wanted to know what they were doing. But good for them for seeing that like being pioneers in that regard and getting in. Um, do you have any memories of either of those ladies in like the women's side of things?
Honestly, I don't. And I mean, I don't necessarily want to be disrespectful to what I don't know, so I can't really speak much on it.
Yeah.
All I can really say is that um, for myself, because there wasn't a lot of, like you say, exposure to it growing up, the main exposure I ever had was at like Olympics. And when it came to the Olympics, like, hell yeah, I'd be watching them play. And like you say, some of the names, like obviously there's the Haley Wickenheisers and some of the other names. But I just remember, it was often the same group of ladies. The coaches' names were always familiar when they were being thrown out. Obviously, I can't recall them right now. But I guess my point of that is I enjoyed watching them. I thought it was great hockey, great theater, specifically between obviously the States and Canada. A lot of the other countries struggled to kind of compete regularly with those two powerhouses. So it was often just the States and Canada. And I think that made it even better for the experience at the time. Um, but I never really was able to remember specific names and, you know, people. In a conversation about it, sure, yeah, I would probably start to remember things. But unfortunately, I can't really speak on specifics when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just to add to that. I remember those like 98 Nagano Olympics to pretty much like now it's always been Canada and the US. Like you could book that into the final pretty much. They would smoke teams. I mean, it's gotten a little bit better. Like Sweden and um I think Russia are not too, and Finland are pretty good
Finland's all
at
right.
women's hockey.
Yeah. Yeah.
I I think now that they have their own league, the Pro Women's Hockey League, it's really going to help them. Like in 10, 15 years when we're still doing this podcast and still hoping the Leafs win Stanley Cup, we'll be able to talk more about the women's game. Like I think I could see there's such a market for that stuff now. I mean, that stuff being like women having more opportunity to do the same thing as the men that I could see like maybe 15, 20 years from now that PWHL go from I think they're at 8 teams now. They could probably go up to 20 or 30. And then who knows, maybe they're having I mean we've talked before privately about why can't they have another team in Toronto for like Markham or things like that. Maybe they put the women in Markham or like let them play regularly at the Scotiabank Arena and things like that. So I feel like women like this, Natalie Darwitz and Chrissy Wendell, who are pillars of the U.S. game. I mean, you need the pillars to start somewhere, right? So, like that's amazing that they're both in there. Um,
Hmm.
in terms of the hockey players who made it to the I made to the Hockey Hall of Fame. Pavel Datsuk, Jeremy Roenick, and Shea Weber. It's basically like our childhood, our teen years, and the last 5 years. It's like if you look at it that way. I remember Jeremy Roenick. I'm glad he went in as a Blackhawk, actually. Jeremy Roenick, I've always loved. I thought he was a great player. Um, Hearing his speech about how if he didn't go to San Jose, he may have like his mental health was so bad that he was thinking of ending things. I'm glad. Shout out to Doug Wilson for being there for him, basically. Uh,
Hmm.
but but my question is for Jeremy Roenick. He was the one who sunk the Leafs the last time they made it to the second round and actually like were winning in a series. He sunk them in game six in double
Hmm.
overtime. Do you have any
Hmm.
hard feelings towards him for that or no?
Not hard feelings. I mean, when it comes to stuff like that, I don't generally get hard feelings in hockey unless people do like dirty things or things that like, you know, result in like a something really bad happening to somebody else. But I distinctly remember that. I remember the feeling of just, you know, the excitement of two overtimes or being in the second overtime and then it just being over. And that heartbreak for sure as a Leaf fan is probably one of the most painful ones for my age, for me personally. I would say that that's probably one of the most scarring playoff defeats that I can think of.
Yeah, I agree with that. That and a 102 where they lost to the Hurricanes. The thing is, so with that team specifically, uh the Roenick year where he scores the winner for Philadelphia versus the Leafs. we we had a tendency to lose like our big guys in the playoffs. Like come playoff time, that's when you'd see McGillney get injured or um McCabe or Sundin or
All of
or
them, yeah.
or all of them. And then you'd have to rely on like Brian Leach, who could still go at like friggin' 38 and Phil Housley. And it was like no. I don't know if they would have gone far though in that year, the Philadelphia year. But like Roenick for me, like that part's iconic. TSN loves his back and forth banter with Patrick Waugh, uh, where Patrick Waugh says, I can't hear Jeremy Roenick anymore because both of my Stanley Cup rings are blocking my ears. Like that's a classic clip.
Hmm.
Anybody our ages, so we're all the three of us are all like mid-30s basically, but anybody our ages who didn't play NHL 94, you got to kind of question like, were you a hockey fan your whole life or were you not? Because like if you didn't play as Roenick on NHL 94, then I mean, did you really play NHL 94, I guess. Funny story, a buddy of mine, he used to work at the Score back when the Score was an independent and not part of Rogers, and he interviewed Roenick, and Roenick said that he gets more questions about um different moves from NHL 94 than he does about his actual playing career.
That's
Uh,
funny.
like that's incredible. Uh Pavel Datsuk, I mean, probably one of the most talented Russian players of all time. Uh,
Hmm.
the fact that he and Zetterberg were drafted in the seventh round and they still made the NHL and then they still helped be like those guys on their dynasty teams. Like I remember when the Red Wings won, I think it was oh 06 was it no 07 08, right? They won and then Pittsburgh won, or was it
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I'm not good like at stuff like that.
oh, I remember now. So Pittsburgh wins in 07 08. Um And then Hossa joins Pittsburgh the following season because he's like, oh, I went to Detroit and they couldn't win. He joins he joins Pittsburgh the
They
following
lose to
season.
Chicago, right?
No. So 07 08 and then 08 09 was back to back Detroit versus Pittsburgh. So so what happened was 07 08 Hossa comes over from I think it's Atlanta to Detroit. Uh, they lose to Pittsburgh in the final. Hossa signs like a 1 year deal to go to Pittsburgh the following season, and then they meet Detroit again, and that's like Babcock's one Stanley Cup that he had. And Zetterberg and Datsuk basically carried that team. I think Johan Franzen, before all the concussions and shit with
Hmm. The
Babcock,
Mule.
yeah, the Mule. Yeah, they had just a great team. And I like Rafalski and Lidstrom were one pair. I think Chelios was even on that team. So uh yeah, crazy stuff. And then Hossa eventually goes to Chicago. Chicago wins uh the Stanley Cup in I think 10-11. And then that's when Rafi Torres hits Hossa and like ends his career in the playoffs where Phoenix played Chicago.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, crazy stuff. Anyways, this isn't about Marian Hossa. This is about Pavel Datsuk. So, I Marian Hossa was a really good player, though. Don't get me wrong.
He
Pavel Dat.
was, yeah.
Yeah, Pavel
And
Dat.
in terms of Datsuk, yeah, I mean he was one of my favorite players to watch. I learned a lot from him. Like him and Yager were two guys. Him, Yager, and Sundin were probably the three guys that I tried to use certain moves or like learned how to play like them when I played myself. I felt like Datsuk it was the best. How do I say it? Like, I mean, I guess the best way to say it is the one story he says growing up, he'd be playing on the rink with 100 kids with one puck, so he had to keep the puck if he wanted the puck. So just being able to like deke so in tight and all different kinds of ways and use his skates to manipulate other people, and also the ability to lift sticks and steal pucks back and He was incredible. I think that if he wasn't so reserved and quiet and just to himself, he could have had a lot more like endorsement deals and like spotlight benefits, let's call them, than he probably had, even though he probably had a bunch being a top player. But, sometimes endorsements don't go to non-great speaking Russian players in the NHL in the past. Um, but yeah, I actually had one buddy who he used to call me Datsuk, and it was like one of the biggest compliments I thought I could get.
Oh, it wasn't
Just the
because you
fact
can't
that
speak English, eh?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was just all the moves, the quick moves in tight, and yeah, I don't know. I think he is one of the best players to ever play the game, and at least one of the most um like influential guys to change how hockey's played. One of my absolute all-time favorite replays of any hockey thing ever is the shootout move does or did. I believe it was Marty Turco he did it the best on. He did it on, I believe, Thomas Vokoun and a couple other guys. But if you've never seen the play I'm talking about, go YouTube, Datsuk dekes out Marty Turco on a shootout. It was either a shootout or penalty shot. I don't remember exactly. But just the way he moves his skates to sell the fact that he's going one way and then completely goes the other way while the goalie doesn't even yet realize he's going the wrong way. It's just incredible because he beat him so bad. And the fact you're talking about an NHL player, somebody that's the best at their craft and one of the best at the craft in the league at the time got made to look like that. It just shows how different of a mental level he was on at that time. So yeah, I think people could all benefit watching him play and learn some things from him. He was amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I misspoke earlier in terms of the Hossa switcheroo. So Pittsburgh lost to Detroit in 07-08. Then he left Pittsburgh to sign with Detroit, and then Pittsburgh beat Detroit in 08-09.
And then he won a cup the next year. Didn't he go to three cups in a row?
Yeah, and then he won with Chicago. And then he won with
That's what I
Chicago.
thought. Okay, okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, crazy. But yeah, Pavel Datsyuk, like as you said, great player, someone you definitely got to watch. He was also like, I don't want to call him a thief or anything like that, but like the way that he could get back and steal the puck. Like what's the award where like best back checker, for lack of a better phrase? It's not
Are
the
you talking about the Lady Bing?
Lady Bing. Yeah, yeah. Lady Bing. Yeah.
Lady Bing's the most gentlemanly award. So basically, who's the best player that doesn't do anything stupid and just quietly goes about playing the game?
Yeah. Or what's the one where they like best defensive forward? There's a word for
Is that
that,
the
right?
Jennings or the Lester B. Pearson or something Jennings? Is it one of those ones? And I don't know. I'm not entirely sure.
That is the
I don't love a
Selkie.
lot of
The
the name of
Selkie.
Selkie. Yeah, I don't love a lot of the awards because I wasn't born in '47, so I don't know a lot
Wait,
of
you
these
weren't?
people.
You weren't? Neither was I, luckily. I mean, I do feel like an old man because if we do podcasts past 10:30, I'm falling asleep, but hey.
hmm
Um, but yeah, the Selke Trophy, they could have basically renamed the Datsuk Trophy because the way this guy could play defensive hockey and score all those points was unbelievable. I mean, as you know, uh we're diehard Leaf fans, but like Detroit was definitely one of those teams that you watched where you were like, God, I wish the Leafs could be on that level or could even compete on that or could compete at that level, you know? Um, it turns out that I'm just on Hockey DB right now. It turns out that Datsuk and Zetterberg's rookie year was 01-02 when when that dynasty team won the Stanley Cup. So like, oh my God, that's so cool. So uh the last guy though for the players was Shea Weber, which I loved Shea Weber before, like when he was in Nashville, he was a staple, definitely a top defenseman. He could really shoot the puck. Well, I'd say he's one of like Canada's best defensemen ever, but
hmm
I don't know if he's in the I mean in the Hall of Fame because he's part of like those really good Canadian men's hockey teams, or because he's like uh one of the most well-known guys in the NHL? Because he never won the cup. And
Yeah, and I heard somebody talking about it not too long ago, and they just said, and it stuck to me, and it was like, you know what, you just got to remember, it's not the NHL Hall of Fame, it's the basically Professional Hockey Hall of Fame, or Hockey Hall of Fame. And if you look at his international accomplishments, I'm pretty sure he won gold as a junior. I'm pretty sure he has 4 or 5 gold medals. He's got a few world championships, and then does he have a Stanley Cup? I don't think he got a Stanley
he
Cup, did
never
he?
got a cup. No, never got.
Yes, but he probably has one of the most like decorated playoff appearance list and stuff like that. Like I'm pretty sure his team made the playoffs almost every year he was in the NHL.
Yeah, and I think he won the Norris Trophy as well.
Couple
Once or
times,
twice.
I believe. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he was known for his slap shot stuff. So like, I mean, he really was quite impactful to the game. He kind of changed the role of defenseman for the most part.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, Price got in last year, but they keep. I think it's more media story than it is in Mon. Like I think Montreal is a team, and the NHL knows Price is never going to play again, but he's still under contract, and every year it's like, well, for the last 4 or 5 years, will Carey Price come back and help the Montreal Canadiens? But he literally so the reason I bring that up is because he got into the Stanley Cup I mean into the Hockey Hall of Fame last year, and he's still technically an active player. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That happened.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure. Well, there was a whole list that came out of Shea Weber's long-term injuries, and like, I don't think he'd ever get certified to play again. And like Carey Price, it may suggest that the injury is possibly overcomable, but like, it's going to take way too much to get to a point of just trying. And it sucks. Like Carey Price was probably my favorite goalie. Like him and Tuukka Rask were probably my two favorite non-Leaf goalies of all time.
Hmm.
Which is funny, obviously, because Rask could and should have been a Leaf. Um, Shout out to Justin Pogge, yay!
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. When it comes to Weber, I think it's fine. Price, it's hard to say. I don't think either of them are ever going to play again, and it is kind of weird that they move the goalpost for some players and not others. Um, but whatever, it's the NHL. What got to kind of
Yeah.
expect they're going to do their own thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me too. Like Mark Savard, I hated the Bruins, but like he was like a maestro on those teams. Like he really worked their offense as well. And then Mike Richards took him out with like that was the first blindside hit that where like the rules changed. He's not a Hall of Famer, Mark Savard, but I'm pretty sure he's still on like LTIR for the Bruins. But now he's coaching the Leafs. So I remember there was I remember years ago because it's us, so we bring up Phil Kessel frequently on this podcast. Just deal with it, people, because it's our pod and we can do whatever we want. But there I remember hearing but initially when they were gonna do the Kessel for two firsts and a second, there was talk that they were gonna do Kessel and Savard for two firsts and a second. But then Burke was like, "Nah, I don't think Savard's that good, so I'm just gonna have we'll just give you the two first and a second for Kessel." And I'm just like, Savard was in the prime of his career at that point. You would have had him instead of Bozak for all those years, like setting up Kessel. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? But yeah, that's I like Burke as a quote, but seeing how he managed the Leafs, I'm like, oh my God. I think it's impressive though. It's 25 minutes in and only now I'm considering shedding a tear for past Leaf teams. So not bad. Not
I was
bad.
gonna say, idea for future show. We should do a ranking of our who we believe are the best and worst GMs and or coaches of our Leaf teams, the ones we grew up watching, like from let's say I don't know '93 until last year.
Oh, I'm down. I'm totally down for that. That would be great. A lot of tears would be shed for that by not only us, but our listeners would also holler and be like, "Yo, um, too emotional. Can't do it. Can't do it anymore." So in terms of the two builders of the league who got in, David Poyle, who was the GM for Nashville, got into the Hall of Fame, and Colin Campbell, who was a director of player safety, and also his son, I forget his son's first name, also played for the Bruins. I remember I was convinced that because Campbell was the head of player safety, that he was rigging the calls to benefit Boston because his son was on that too.
He's honestly a doorknob donkey. I do not like Colin Campbell. I think he's an idiot. I think the NHL's stupid for recognizing him. I think that they don't even understand that it's a negative thing that he's recognized in that sense. I don't even want to go into it. Let's spend the time talking about Poyle and forget Campbell.
Hoyle's the guy I wanted to talk about actually, because
Perfect.
Campbell, besides what I just said, I have nothing more to add. I basically agree with you. Uh, David Poyle, on the other hand, like to me, he personifies the excellence of having expansion in a sport league and making it work on a team. Instead of struggling with like 25 different owners in the NHL, sometimes being the owner of Phoenix, who's now in Utah, and I think they're in great hands with that owner because he owns the Jazz, and they'll finally get some stability in Utah. Um, Hoyle showed that, Nashville can be a good place to play hockey. It doesn't have to be all these cold markets. It's Nashville could be good. Uh, yeah, David Legwand. I mean, Paul Correa was there for a little bit. Shea Weber. The team right now is pretty good as well, like at least on paper. I mean, they're bouncing back. We went through the league last week and they were quite struggling, but yeah, without him, I don't know if like the NHL expansion is such a good idea. Would you agree, disagree, or
Yeah, I mean, expansion's always good. Expansion's always good for the league. I think they should actually expand more. I can't wait for the time where there is like, 40 teams. But in terms of Poyle, like growing up, Nashville was kind of always one of those teams that no matter what kind of circumstance they were in or um, restrictions they may be trying to deal with, lack of cap, lack of prospects, whatever it may be, they always seem to be relevant and they always seem to have a certain brand of hockey that they always play by. Um, I always respected that franchise a lot growing up, and was jealous at points of them when they had, Suter and Weber in their prime and they could be creative on a lot of different fronts. And obviously the mastermind behind that is Poyle. And um, not gonna lie, I kind of underappreciated that guy the whole time he was working. And then kind of once I started to understand what it is he really did, like the scope of his actual contributions, um, I gained a lot more appreciation for him.
yeah, definitely agree. Like some of his defensive, the scoring's always been an issue for them. I find like throughout the entire tenure of their team, they've always had like one or two guys who could pop it in, but then they don't have like I feel like to have a good team to like win the Stanley Cup. I mean, they went to the finals that one year and lost to I think it was Tampa. But they they've always had trouble scoring, So, but their defense was always like top of the league. I remember a couple of years ago, I think Ekholm, the guy who's in Edmonton now, was just like their sixth defenseman. And I'm like, if that dude's your sixth defenseman, like, well, how good is your defense?
Yeah, I know. And they also had unreal goaltending.
Yeah.
Um, I forget
Yeah.
exactly who they had before Pekka, but they had Pekka for a
They
long
had
time.
They had Vokun for a while, Mike Dunham. Um, they always had guys who could be like your goalie for the next like 5, 6 years, you know? But
Hmm.
and like Saros is no slouch either.
Saros. They had Connor Ingram for a while there too. I mean, I don't think he's, super spectacular, but I do think he's an NHL goalie.
Who was that? Sorry, I missed it.
Connor Ingram
Oh yeah,
plays
yeah,
for
yeah.
Utah now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Went through a few teams there.
I think even Mike Richter was on that team for like 5 minutes, like Nashville. I might be wrong.
Sounds about right. I feel
Yeah.
like we're missing a big name there too. There was also what's his name? He had such a vanilla name before Vokun. Wasn't Smith, was it?
It might have been. There was a guy named Smith there for sure.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but there was somebody, yeah, with like a relatively vanilla name. Um,
Uh, Chris Mason.
yes, that's the one. And no, not Steve Mason. Just Chris was there, I believe, right?
Yeah, Chris Mason.
Yeah.
Yeah. List of Nashville Predators goalies. This is on Hockey Reference. Uh,
I feel like there's another name we're missing.
Dan Ellis was there for
It's another
five
guy I was kind
minutes.
of thinking of.
Uh, Vokun, we said. Devin Dubnyk played for them for 5 minutes. Um, Carter Hutton played for a season there. Uh, yeah, that's about it of those
Yeah.
guys. But it's interesting, like we both love the league, and Joe also loves the league. So we could just go off for like an at like 6 hours, just remember this guy, remember how good he was and stuff like that. But it's with these Poile teams though, like the, they had the ability to probably like, in my opinion, they should have won a cup by now, but that was the one thing that always eluded them because of the scoring. But got um they always got it done otherwise, like on the defensive side of things. Like they were never really like smoked or anything like that.
Hmm. Yeah, they were always competitive. They were always one of those hardworking teams that almost never gave a free game away.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing too is when Poyle retired and then Barry Trotz came back to be their like GM and president, that was the only move that made sense, Like he's got to be the guy who who takes over because he was their first coach, and like the Poyle Trotz connection for the first like decade of the team was, I mean, it's rare to have like two guys in the same spot for over 10 years, or to spend your whole career with one team as an executive or even a coach. And like for Poyle to do that, like that's pretty impressive, I would say.
Hmm. For sure.
Yeah. So in terms of now though, I mean, you look at his team that Trotz has got for him, and you got I think the oddly enough, the defense might be their issue now because which is something you couldn't say for years because I mean they have all the forwards there. Well they have all these guys like past their, I don't know if they're necessarily past their prime, but you got like O'Reilly, Forsberg, Stamkos, uh oh, okay. So Joe's not going to join us tonight, just for everyone to hear. We'll get back to him uh, on another podcast, but Tori and I will always be here, basically, barring like, I don't know, the Leafs winning the cup, because we'll actually be in the, God, if we could get Leaf tickets when they're in the Stanley Cup final, like holy smokes, uh, um, we would have to get Joe to come in from like the States to be like, Nattering CHEL at game 7 of Leafs versus Nashville. Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. Do you wanna is there anything you had on your mind for us to discuss, or
I mean, I don't know how much we want to go into it, but I think we should give a shout out to the Marlies. I know this is kind of more Leafs related stuff, but the Marlies are pumping right now. I don't know their exact record, but I know Artur Akhtiamov Another guy that's not often talked about right now in our goalie system is, I believe the last time I checked, I think he was like 4-0-1 with like a 946 save percentage, which is
Crazy.
like insane, especially first year coming over from Russia with the different angles and stuff with the smaller rink. Um, I mean, leading into that conversation, I think the Leafs are finally starting to get a little bit of talk around their goalie system, which I think is very deserved. And I know I've mentioned in the past that I'm a goalie guy, so like I pay close attention to the Leafs goalie system, and I've been probably bugging you and some of my other buddies about like these names and these people, and it's like calm down. He's a 19-year-old European goalie, like relax. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's like we got a bunch of them coming up, and for us as Leaf fans, we went what the last 2 decades with being able to talk about two, maybe three goalies, like younger goalies that aren't old guys coming from other teams on a big contract. So to have multiple in the same year, it's like something completely new. And for somebody who loves prospects and goalies, it's like really, really new and really fresh. And I don't know, I'm really excited, and I'm starting to hear more conversations about it, and broad stream, which is nice. But yeah, little love for the Marlies, and they're doing well. Will Nye's younger brother's doing quite well. I think he's up there in the league scoring, and Minton just came back and scored in his first game, and we got the Benning going down there. Going to be probably a top four guy on the Marlies. Who Benning's an NHL player, so to have him on the Marlies who are already doing well, where we're trying to develop our kids, it's a really good situation. I'm pretty stoked about it. It's too bad I can't watch the games more.
Yeah, I remember when they had Leafs TV, or even the odd time TSN would show like 4 or 5 games a year. That was always good. In terms of this guy, the goalie that you just mentioned, what's his name? Archer Arkamiev or
Ar-
something like
Artur
that? Yeah,
Akhtiamov.
Archer Aktiemov. I'll get it
Yep.
before the end of the season. But you think he's better than Hildeby?
No, I mean, I think they're different goalies. I think Hildeby is more of a big, for lack of a better term, monster who just covers a lot of space and has some athleticism to go along with it, where Akhtiamov is more like athletic based, but also like quiet and sound. So like that's the other thing I like about it is that there's lots of different styles to watch because you got Matt Murray down there as well. So like that's a pretty good trio that you have along with Vladislav Peksa, who's playing in the ECHL, along with we gave John Gillies an AHL deal. He's another 6'6" kind of journeyman, number four, number five goalie. And then we also have Timofey Obintsev, who we drafted this past year, who just in Europe just kind of stole the starting gig, or is trying to, or is in the midst of stealing the starting gig. Which, when you get into Russian goaltenders, often it's has zero involvement with it developing a kid or like playing a kid because you want him to be better because they know most of the time if he's that good, he's going to be gone and over in North America by the time he's 20-ish years old. So a lot of good goalies at a young age don't really get opportunity, which also feeds into the whole, goalies take longer to develop narrative, where a lot of these European goalies need to come over and then spend 2 or 3 years in the AHL developing their craft, where the guys we have are over a year or two earlier than the norm, which means they should be adjusted and better suited a year and a half than expected. So even though they're raw, they're probably only like a calendar year, maybe next year's playoffs away from, really having the conversation of which two goalies are we going to move forward with. And maybe it's not even Stolarz or Wall. Like maybe after Stolarz is done in 2 years and Wall is what, 3 or 4?
Three, yeah.
Maybe in 3 seasons from now, we don't even have either of our current goalies as our starters. Who knows?
Yeah, I think for that part it depends on the playoff success, right? Because if they go out in round one again, I mean they'll give Stolarz and Wall next season again, but then I could see them moving on, like you said. The that is like I like how excited you get for the prospects because I'm not as up to date on that stuff, so I start getting excited too. It's just like I wish I could watch that as well. Have you been to any of the games this year, the Marlies?
No, not yet. No, I do want to get down to a couple. Like they're probably my favorite sporting event because it's cheap. The food and drink are affordable. For the most part, I just buy one of the cheapest tickets in the house, and I often I'll just stand on the standing room. In the playoffs, it doesn't work so well. It's usually pretty packed. You kind of need a seat. But regular season, I find just buy a $14 ticket, go down, stand. You're because there's only one bowl. The standing room's at the top of the first bowl, so like you're just 5, 6 rows above the top of the glass, so you're still really low. And I just find like kind of standing keeps you in the action, and I don't know. I really like the experience. Anybody who kind of likes, close up hockey that's cheap, that has cheap amenities and is local, hit up a Marlies game.
Yeah, definitely agree. That or uh the OHL, like even the PWHL, I don't think the tickets are that expensive for. But yeah, that part's pretty exciting about the goaltending. What's your expectation of the defense? Like, is there anybody coming up, or what are we doing there?
Well, a couple things with the defense. We're kind of signing all our guys at the NHL level. So it depends on what kind of logjam gets created. But the best thing about having a logjam is that it forces performance, and eventually, at some point, somebody's going to get pushed down the rung. I mean, a good example right now for the Leafs is Benoit. I mean, up until now, there's been no need to pull him out of the lineup. He's been fine. He's a good elemental defenseman that does a certain job. But the fact that they have, just as many good defensemen where he gets pushed out, like that's not a bad thing. Only thing it's bad for is anybody trying to kind of squeak up. But to answer your question, there's a couple guys to watch. A couple different levels of watching. There's obviously Ben Danford, who we picked up last year. He's playing in the OHL. I forget which team he's on off the top of my head. Maybe Guelph or Oshawa or somewhere-ish local. Um, then there's also Noah Chadwick, who he's a bit of an interesting story. He um, was taken late in the draft. A lot of other teams, I forget his story off the top of my head, whether he was small or whether he just wasn't getting opportunity, and then he got opportunity, he boomed, and the Leafs grabbed him later in the draft, fourth, fifth round, something like that. And a lot of people are saying he's more of like a second round prospect at this point. So we got two guys that are like in the OHL and WHL, might be Lethbridge or something like that Chadwick's with, and they're both like the stud defensemen of their team for the most part. And they maybe not Chadwick, but Danford will be in conversation for the juniors tournament. And then at the AHL level, there is I always mix the two Finns up. There's Niemela, who is a centerman. And then there's no, sorry, Niemela is the defenseman, and Ronnie Hervinen is the forward. They're both taken in the same draft, I believe. Um, they're long shots, both of them. And then there's also the kid we got at the deadline last year, Cade Weber or Cade Weber.
Oh yeah.
He's down there. The rest of the guys are kind of AHL level guys for the most part. Nothing too excited to get it, or nothing to get too excited about. But I was just gonna step back to the goalies just quickly when you were saying about possibly moving on from the goalies. The cap that's gonna have to be committed to goalies moving forward for the next few years is gonna be insane. The kind of standard, the watermark, if you will, over the last few years has been probably between 5 and 6 million, I would kind of guess, not without knowing the exact finite number myself. Um, and now we're seeing contracts up in the eights, and Shesterkin's gonna possibly get double digits, if not well over double digits. And if and when we have these young kids coming up, or if Stolitz or Waller are guys for the next couple of years, like we're spending under $5 million on two goalies that can go on any night you need them.
Hmm.
Now you may or may not have a stud star that's gonna, steal you a game when you really need it. But we shouldn't have a guy who loses us a game either. And moving forward beyond that, uh, if if you need to spend a lot of money on a big name goalie, if this goaltending doesn't work after a couple of years and you say, you know what, let's do a Cujo thing or let's do a Belfour thing where we go and just buy, a top end goalie. Well, it's going to cost you 10 or 12 million and you're going to need a cheap contract behind him as your second goalie, which is perfect if you have a goalie on an entry level contract.
Yeah.
So it gives us the flexibility over the next few years to either go with our guys, find other guys, or go and get other guys and then fill in whatever decision we make behind that. So that's also why I'm kind of excited is nothing is foolproof, but when you have so many elements in place and so many angles covered, you're probably going to find success somewhere along that avenue.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that for sure. I'm hoping that we don't have a guy who's making 12 million but can still like give us playoff success. I mean, uh I'm glad that Samsonov allows the Leafs last 2 years ago to move on from the first round to the second round. And I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, as much as I want them to go far, I don't want to pay this dude like 8 or 9 million bucks a season. And then he got injured in game five. No, I mean against the Panthers. I think game one. And then Wall came on and played pretty well, but like the ultimately he was overmatched. Um, Basically what I'm trying to say with that is that like I definitely want the Leafs to go far. Don't get me wrong, but I'm also in fear of like if the Leafs go to the third round or even lose in the final, I'm in fear of first if my heart can take that, and secondly, um, will we extend like say it's still ours? Do we extend him from like the 2 year 2 million contract to like here's 5 years and like 8 million bucks a season? I don't know if I'm prepared for that. So
I don't think you need to worry about that right now. Let's just focus on this year and next year. And I think as Leaf fans, we sometimes get a little wrapped up in what's to come. And I think that's part of the problem of why a lot of other fan bases kind of don't like us because we're always worried about something. And don't get me wrong, been there, done that. But I think that we've already gone through the trouble, if you will, of paying all our guys. And as the cap goes up, yes, their contracts are going to go up, but not substantially based on what they're already being made. Like in 5 years, if Matthews is getting, what is it now, 13 and a half?
mhm.
You think in 5 years, I don't think we're talking that he's getting 25 million per season. It might be, 3 or 4 million more than what he's getting, but it's not like you're taking on the difference from an entry level to, a kid who's asking for 15 million a season. And I think in 2 or 3 seasons, like, let's just use a guy like Mitchkov randomly, just because I was looking at his name. What if he puts up point per game over his just over point per game for 3 years? His contract's probably going to be over 10 million. And you're going from an entry level with bonuses, so tops maybe 2.5, 3 million, up to 10 million. So you're taking a $7 million increase. Like, if we just chill and like, obviously the decision's going to have to be made with Marner, but I think that the future beyond this year and or next year is irrelevant because if we don't have success over the next year or two, half of this is going to look different anyways. Um, as we continue to move forward, it's been a noticeable shift in draft strategy for the Leafs. They used to go under Dubas's watch and under the guy that left for Pittsburgh, one of our head scouts. I forget his name. Um, he and they tended to take skill over anything else, where clearly Trey Living is looking for size. So like we're gonna see a lot more physicality and fighting and big defensemen and shot blocking and corner battles and that kind of skill play, versus open ice one-on-one dangle, play make kind of skill set. Um, so I think that that's going to be, beneficial to plugging bottom six roles and bottom pairing defenseman roles. Like we're gonna see a guy like, let's say, Benoit come up, a guy similar to him through the system, as opposed to seeing another Liljegren. Like I don't think we'll ever see Benning draft a guy like Liljegren moving forward, right?
Yeah, True Living draft a guy like Lilligren for sure. Um, yeah, I agree with that. I think you can tell like the size is the big thing. Like Connor Timmins is getting a huge look so far this season. And I'm like, I mean, they gave Justin Hall so many chances. I love Justin Hall as a Marley, but as a Leaf, I was like, why? Uh, Timmins, same sort of deal. I'm like, I like him in the minor leagues. Now that he's getting all these looks, I like the fact that they're making him like the guy with the lowest ice time of all the defensemen. Like I know you said you don't want to put a number on them for like top pair, bottom pair, but he's
Mhm.
definitely like the last guy who they're putting out there unless there's an injury. Then they'll play him like instead of 11 minutes a night, they'll play him like 15. So
And sorry, you said Timmins there, right?
Timmins, yeah, Timmins.
Yeah. So I mean, like right now, I actually pulled up my sheet so I could have better intel in this conversation or this part of the conversation.
Yeah.
But obviously, Benning got waived, and Myers. The Leafs seem to really like Myers, and I'm of the belief that Myers is going to stay the number 8 defenseman. When you have a guy like Hockenbaugh that could the bottom could fall out at any point, you got to carry 8 defensemen. Like you have to, or else you're going to be burning another asset at the deadline just to get away from 8 defensemen. So since you have them, you might as well just keep it. Even though the righty lefty combo isn't ideal. The reason I'm saying all that is we know the top 5 on any given night. Number 6 will probably rotate to some capacity between Benoit, Hockenpot, Timmins, and Myers, potentially. Um, but Benoit, to me, seems like a guy that can easily sit for a game here and there and bring the same game the next time he comes in the lineup.
Hmm.
Um, the pairings I'd actually really like to see, again, number them how you will. I was actually kind of, side note, I was surprised to see Riley and Hockenpah tonight. That was a
Yeah.
little unexpected.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of OEL and Hockenpah
Yeah.
going back to Riley and Tanev, and then putting McCabe back on his left side and playing him with Timmins. I feel like McCabe and Timmins could be a sneaky, nasty pair to have to play against. Repeat the exact same comment to the other pairings as well. Like I
Yeah.
think all 3 of those pairings could have some good elements and some good toughness, but good puck moving and some good size and some good veteran and responsibility and like I think there'd be 3 really well-rounded lines or
Yeah.
pairs.
This is one of the years where um like we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that the problem with the Leafs is you don't really know what to expect until the playoffs. But in terms of like in season storylines that I'm focusing on, if I'm honest, it's the defense because this defense actually intrigues me. Whereas before I was like, once you get past, how do I say this nicely? I think Riley is a very good defenseman. I think he's slightly overrated. Like I don't think if you're like, oh, we need to go out and get a number one defenseman, I don't think you're saying no, we don't because it's Riley. Like I think he's an excellent defenseman though. So I sorry, but my point with that is that like this is the first time where I look at the other pairs and I'm like, you know, this could be like, as you said, a sneaky, nasty defense. And I think that like all those pairs that you listed, they can get points from those guys because that's something we've totally lacked for a long, long time. Is like I think the reason why Riley gets so much credit as like the top guy, quote unquote, for the Leafs is the fact that like he's the only one who can score more than 10 points a season. I mean, we saw McCabe get some points last year, but now that we have Ekman Larson, and I mean Timmins to me, I know I just criticized him 5 minutes ago, but to me, he has the potential. Like he's still very raw because of how limited he plays, but he's got the potential to me to be a points guy back there too. Like not just be a defensive defenseman, but also, I don't know, put up 20 or 30 points.
Yeah, I could see that. And I mean, on top of those three pairings, like 2 points of that is even if you consider Riley Tanev your best for your top pairing, if they don't have it that night, and you got to lean on OEL and Puck and Paw who have it that night, or you got to lean on Timmins and McCabe who are playing a really good game, you can give them more minutes. And that's why I say, like, we can't really label them because if you looked at every single game and every single period, you know, pairing one will actually be pairing three, and pairing two will be pairing one, and it'll jump around a lot.
Hmm.
But the other point of that is imagine for whatever reason, you just got to dress four pairs of defensemen. So, I know that's not real, but let's just pretend you dressed four pairs. Our fourth pair would be Benoit and Myers.
Hmm.
That's probably one of the best fourth pairs any team would have. And I know that's a bit of a silly conversation because nobody has four
Hmm.
pairs, really. But I think our fourth pair could rival a lot of teams' third pairs. And the fact that we could go into the playoffs with the goalie depth we just talked about and the defense depth we just talked about, which I don't think the Leafs have gone into the playoffs with both, or at least both at the same time
Hmm.
that we can probably even recall. There's always been like a clear weakness or a clear question mark. I mean, Samsonov the last year, Campbell the year before, fill in the blank, all the goalies, Freddie, even like I love Freddie, but in the playoffs, something different happened to him. So like it's really impressive and excitable to me. And like further to answer your question earlier when you're asking about who's on the Marlies to watch, I forgot about Kokkonen, who's I don't think he's an NHL defenseman, but maybe he could fill a little bit of time. He's more of an offensive guy, but he's got a little bit of nastiness, kind of like OEL. But the other
Hmm.
guy I didn't bring up that I should have brought up is Marshall Rafai.
I was gonna just ask you about him actually.
Mhm.
But like I liked what I saw of him in the preseason, and he's had like two or three games in previous seasons with the Leafs. Like I like that dude a lot. Like he's very good positionally. I mean he's definitely like if you're ranking the pairs, he's on the more bottom end of those things. But I mean, I think he can. I think he's gonna get some games this year.
He might. The difficult thing with him is he'd have to clear waivers. So unless they could get him up on emergency or something like that again, which I don't really know how that all always works. Sometimes I do, or some little things I do, but not always, or enough at least to say I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So who knows? But I do know that he'd have to go back on waivers. So like, if given the chance, they probably would just let him stay down there so they don't have to expose him. And then maybe you say, if it's for 3 games here, 2 games there, maybe you bring up a Weber or a Niemela just to be like, here's your little reward for being part of the organization, and we know you're not going to get claimed, so come up, play 5 games, and then go back to the Marlies, and hopefully you take that as a benefit to your game. But I I mean, who knows, right? Like if Benoit, fractured his tibia tomorrow and he's out for like the entire rest of the season, then yeah, I could see them calling up Rafai to kind of fill in that spot.
Mhm. Do you think Myers will get more of a look? Because I mean, he's only played once or twice so far this season, but
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's kind of the catch-22 right now is the benefit is he's on the roster working with the NHL coaches and the conditioning trainers and the nutritionists and all that, and he's with the guys, so he's part of the team. Um, yeah, he's not playing, but like who do you take out? And we haven't had injuries, knock on wood, yet. So like you don't really need to force him in there. Plus the other intricate thing in there is if he doesn't play. Again, I don't remember the exact rules. I think it's like 10 days or 7 games or whatever the timeline is. If you don't play in any of those games, you're allowed to go down on a conditioning stint.
Mhm.
So, like, I think you're probably going to see that over the next few days is him go down to the Marlies on a conditioning stint, play 3 or 4 games, and then kind of come back up. And then who knows, maybe between now and then something happens to, one of our defensemen. Maybe Tanev blocks a shot and breaks his finger and misses 20 games or something like that, right?
yeah, because I thought it was telling. I mean, we always knew as soon as Hakanpää's healthy, he's going in the lineup. Don't get me wrong there, but I thought it was telling that they picked Benoit over Timmins for that.
Hmm.
And then the other part to that was if they didn't like Benoit and they decided that pairing of Benoit Timmins was not good. I was kind of expecting them to maybe for tonight's game. We're recording this during Washington versus the Leafs. But this will come out on Friday. So I was kind of expecting maybe they put in both Hakanpää and Myers, not necessarily Hakanpää and keep Timmins in the lineup. But
Yeah, I mean, one thing I said to my other buddies at the start of the game is they were talking about it how the Leafs, for the first time in a long time, had three left-handed defense and three right-handed defense starting. And I said to my buddies, I was like, I'd like to know the date, the last time the Leafs had three righties and three lefties playing for them on defense, because I could probably honestly say without knowing for sure that it's been a while. It's been many years, probably. And
mhm.
it's kind of weird the fact that now we have too many righties almost. I shouldn't even say too many righties. We have more than enough righties. But I think the thing that a lot of people were kind of overlooking, like I watched a few podcasts today, and they were talking about, oh yeah, Benoit is going to come out, or sorry, Benoit's going to stay in because we got to keep the left guys on the left and the right guys on the right. It's like, yeah, but we'd been playing OEL with Riley, and OEL's a left-handed defenseman playing right D, and sometimes McCabe plays right D, even though he's a lefty as well. So you got
Mhm.
Riley, McCabe, Benoit, and OEL as your four lefties. And then you have Myers, Hakanpää, Tanev, and Timmins as your four righties. So on your roster, you got four righties, four lefties. Like that's perfect to me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. I like the size too of all these guys. Like that they're bigger and meaner because I that's one thing that I found was a little I don't want to say disheartening or I guess frustrating is more the word because you could tell like these teams like Tampa or Vegas or Colorado, like their defense are massive. And these are the past cup winners, right? So to have such like little guys, you kind of knew it wasn't going to happen. Neil, I mean, I know when Joe comes back, whenever that is, we it'll be like weeks in advance, but we talk about teams from like 30 years ago. So it's our like I said, it's our pod. We can do what we want. But my point was going to be, I want to have a discussion on Liljegren and Sandin, and just like what was the point of drafting these dudes only to move on from them. That's basically my premise of when we have that talk.
Hey, Sandine got us Cowan.
Oh, that's true. Uh Liljegren, I think it was overhyped. Just and a precursor to for the listeners, a teaser. Oh, sorry, you're behind. You're behind. Never mind. Never mind. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. When we're watching hockey, dear listeners, Tori's usually in the first period and I'm at like the regular time of the game. So I have to stop hooting and hollering.
Well,
Uh
considering him, there's only 6 minutes left and it's 3-1. I guess that it probably means that something happened. So we'll see what happens. But
yeah, it's it. Oh, come on. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Anyways, so Tori, this has been great. As I said a few times, this will be out Friday. We'll be back next Tuesday. We're recording it on a Wednesday, but we'll go back to our regular schedule of Tuesdays starting next week. Uh, Thanks again for listening to us, and we'll catch you on the flip side, I guess. Or stay frigid. Stay frigid because it's a cold sport. There we go.